Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. It gives me great pleasure to welcome retired Professor Paul Connett to It's Rainmaking Time. He is the director of the Fluoride Action Network and the lead author in the book, The Case Against Fluoride, How Hazardous Waste Ended Up in Our Drinking Water and the Bad Science and Powerful Politics That Keep It There. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that I've been upset about fluoride for many years. I've known that it's been in our water, that this has been approved by the American Dental Association, the California Dental Association, by many agencies, and people have found out that fluoride is dangerous for not only our health, but our children's health. I've called in Paul today to talk about his book, to lay out the details for us, and to also give us the contextual history, which is represented and spoken of in the book in a very detailed manner, why fluoride has been in our water for 60 years. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Paul Connett to It's Rainmaking Time.
Thank you, Kim. Nice to be here.
I tell you, in a way, it's nice to be here with you because of the great work that you're doing. Part of me says it's really not nice to be here about what we're going to talk about.
That's right. This issue, the fluoridation should never have begun. And once it began, there are many times when it should have ended. It should never have begun because this is a terrible medical practice. To use the public water supply to deliver medicine is absolutely a stupid thing to do, because once you put the medicine in the water, you can't control the dose because you can't control how much water people drink. You can't control it, who it goes to. It goes to everyone, including bottle-fed babies, which I shall talk about more later. And there's no individual supervision by a doctor, and it's violating the individual's right to informed consent to medicine. So essentially what you're doing is you're allowing the government, in the case of California, the state government, to do to everyone what an individual doctor can do to no one, to force medicine on them. So it's a bad medical practice, and we've never done it with anything else, with no other medicine. This is the only time that we've used the public water supply to deliver medicine, apart from a short experiment with iodine in the 1930s, which was a complete failure because it couldn't control the dose, and some people were overdosed with iodine. And as I said, there have been many times now when this practice should have stopped. And in most recent times, it was when, in 1999, the Center of Disease Control, or I should say, the Oral Health Division of the Center of Disease Control. There's a difference here. The Center of Disease Control is a massive federal bureaucracy to protect our health, supposedly. 20,000, 30,000 people down in Atlanta, Georgia. The Oral Health Division is only 30 people, and they're just dentally trained people. And their mission is to promote fluoridation far and wide in the United States, and even support mandatory statewide fluoridation. So when you're dealing with the CDC, you're dealing with essentially a lobby for fluoridation. So don't be surprised when they come out with statements like fluoridation is one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century, which is quoted nearly every day somewhere in the world. But in 1999, even this Oral Health Division admitted that they'd got the mechanism of fluoride's benefit wrong for 50 years. For 50 years, they thought that the baby needed fluoride before the teeth had erupted. They even had pediatricians giving fluoride tablets to pregnant women and to babies before their teeth had erupted. And the idea being is that fluoride would build up in the tooth enamel, and so when the teeth eventually erupted in the mouth, they would be less subject to acid attack. Well, the acid, of course, comes from the bacteria rotting down to produce acids, the sugar to acids. And that's the start of tooth decay. And then in 1999, they said, whoops, we're wrong. The predominant mechanism of fluoride's action is topical. It works from the outside of the tooth, not from inside the body. And at that point, the penny should have dropped. If you use a different strategy of encouraging everybody to use fluoridated toothpaste and brush it on the teeth and spit it out, you solve the health problems because you're not exposing every tissue in the body to this toxic substance. and there's no argument that fluoride is toxic, you're not exposing every tissue to a toxic substance, and B, you're not exposing people that don't want it. So you solve the ethical problem and the health problem in one strategy. Stop fluoridating the water, and if you still want fluoride, it's out there. The fluoridated toothpaste is universally available. But sadly, the Center of Disease Control did not take that opportunity in 1999, and so we still have them promoting fluoridation, and we still have people suffering from this rather ridiculous practice.
Okay, now listen, I've read The Case Against Fluoride from cover to cover. It is really a landmark book. It is so detailed in terms of the historical perspective of how fluoride became known, what really was known about it, the harm that it causes. Even in the 1800s, we knew this. I have a couple of detailed questions, actually pages of notes for you.
Okay.
And I want to let you go to town with it, but I want to just cut in right here at the beginning. There is no control of who gets it in the dose. We get that. But there's a distinction that you make in the book between a dose and dosage. Explain it, because I think we're all going to hear it the same. And then I want you to explain why infants are not just little adults on an immunity level.
Okay. Well, first of course, there are two huge distinctions. One is the difference in concentration and dose. And that's a distinction which they've obfuscated for 60 years, because you'll notice that when the proponents are arguing for fluoridation and they have to deal with all the health studies which show harm, they always say, oh, these are at high concentrations. There's been no studies that show harm at 1 part per million, as if the concentration was the guiding factor. This is ridiculous. So they dismissed, for example, the whole of the National Research Council report from 2006, which announced that the safe drinking water standard of 4 parts per million was not safe and needed to be lowered by the EPA. And after 5 years, they haven't done that. But the response was, oh, well, 4 parts per million is far higher than the 1 part per million that we have in the water. Well, that's nonsense. That means they don't know the difference in concentration and dose, because somebody drinking over 4 liters of water a day, of which there are many, would get more fluoride than somebody drinking 1 liter at 4 parts per million. So you can't make this comparison based upon on concentration. You've got to make these comparisons based upon dose, which makes this huge 507-page report from the National Research Council very important indeed. So now to answer your question. Sorry, I'm a bit long.
No, you are answering the question. That's good. Keep going.
So the difference between dose and dosage. The difference is key when you're comparing adults with children. That's the key thing. So what we do, because I think everybody knows that the same dose of aspirin, which might be safe for an adult, is not safe for an infant. You know, if 1,000 milligrams of aspirin is safe for an adult, you wouldn't give 1,000 milligrams to a baby. So how do toxicologists adjust for this? The answer is they divide by body weight. They divide by the body weight. So once you've determined a safe dose for an adult, you divide by the adult's body weight, and that gives you a safe dosage. So a safe dose would be measured in milligrams per day. A safe dose, which would only apply to adults now, see, milligrams per day, a safe dose would only apply to adults. And then when you divide by the adult's weight, which is 70 kilograms, you get the dosage, milligrams per kilogram body weight per day. And that figure you can now apply to infants. You may want an extra safety factor for infants because, as you alluded to, you can't treat babies as little adults. Their systems are far, far more vulnerable. And in terms of vulnerability, the most important fact that I learned 15 years ago, when my wife literally forced me to read the literature on this, was the level in mother's milk, the level of fluoride in mother's milk. Now let's step back a second and ask ourselves, what is mother's milk? It's the baby's first meal, determined over millions of years of evolution of life through, the sea creatures, eventually through mammals, and eventually through human beings.